All right, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Well, the holiday season is over now, and it's time to get back into the swing of things. I appreciate everyone's patience, but I wasn't able to upload so frequently. I was out of town for a while, visiting with the family, for the Christmas and New Year's holidays. Now we're getting back into the normal swing of things. Hopefully there'll be some more frequent uploads going on from time to time here in 2019. Hope everyone had a excellent New Year's celebration. This case comes to us today from a suggestion that was given to us by Rick Schmitz UK, and I really want to thank him for suggesting to cover the case here of the West murders. But it's like before him, I had never really heard about this case, and this was one where I was like, it actually seems like a very, very well documented true crime incident. So this was something new for me. I mean, I guess I'm of course in America. This seems like it was definitely getting more press in the UK. But the thing is, I'm going to tell you flat out, I'm not an expert. I have to introduce it that way because I'm still going through all of this massive, you know, all these volumes of material that they have on this. There's a lot written about it, and there's also a huge list of documentaries that have been put out there. I was going through the ITV documentary, which is enormous, as well as the House of Horrors film just recently. And what I would say about this is I'm going to introduce the case by saying this. There is this giant question that people explore when it comes to things you like the West murders. Does society create the monster, or does the monster wreak havoc on society? Which one is it? Because that seems like the things that the articles and the documentarians are trying to push with the West murders, with like Fred and Rose West, and it's like the real answer to that is no matter who the person is, they are not a monster. They are mentally deranged individuals. And with the case of Fred West, this is really going to focus on him. It just seems like every single possible thing went wrong in his life. And, it's like we're talking about 12 horrific murders, and there could be more. How did we get to this point? Well, the biggest things that I notice are just like he had a horrible upbringing in a place called Moorcourt Farm. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Moorcourt. But it's like they grew up without electricity, working on a farm, which, that couldn't be a good thing. You learn a good work ethic, right? But having a mom that encouraged him to perform bestiality and sex on animals, and I was like, what? What on earth is going on? And people wonder how this stuff gets worse. But there's a big thing to say about that with people like Fred West, where it's like, you know, the thing is, people learn how to hide those type of inner demons. People learn how to kind of put on a different face for the public. Because what do people say about him once he got a little bit older? They say that he was very charming, he was very good with the ladies, he didn't care about how they felt, but like he cared about, only himself, but he was very good. And like you can even hear some of the voice recordings of Fred West when he's just like, he's saying that, he would only go out dressed this certain way. He was a very meticulous dresser. He knew about things that were fashionable. He cared about things, and he cared about his social appearance, and he cared about blending in. And I'm reminded a little bit of American Psycho, the film with Christian Bale, right? Patrick Bateman and all that, because people know how to manipulate society. And absolutely, otherwise they would have been caught a long time ago. Now, I got to say another controversial statement. When I was back in, college, the university days, someone made a comment to me once at a party when he was like, it seems like the dangerous people always slip through the cracks. I'm kind of paraphrasing what he said, but he was like, it seems like the dangerous people always slip through the cracks. Like people just bring the hammer down on, someone like who is not exactly the most guilty because they're the person who isn't, like, someone who is not, who doesn't know how to manipulate the system the way that Fred West did. I mean, we see this countless times in my country, America, with the Virginia Tech shooter and with, people like Elliot Rodger, the Isla Vista shooter, when they get investigated by the police, they get investigated by doctors, and then they're like, oh, well, nope, nothing wrong with him. He can go. That's the type of thing that that guy was talking about. Why is it that so many dangerous people are able to fool the legal experts and the medical experts? Well, it's kind of like the whole Fred West mentality when he's like, he knows how to sort of manipulate society. He knows how to put on that veneer of just like being normal. And you can hear his audio recordings. He doesn't sound like, he's like batshit crazy. Someone like Eileen Wernos or something, who, you definitely sounded like she was batshit mentally insane. Now, this is going to be, I think, really think that this is going to turn into a series of uploads because there are just so many things to go through. But what we can say with Fred West is that there are some horrible things that went into his mental state that would have brought upon these horrific murders. It's not only the fact that his mother might have encouraged him to have sex acts with animals. No, he suffered a variety of injuries in his life, and especially he received a skull fracture after falling off of a motorcycle, as well as, if I recall correctly, well, where did I read that? That he fell out of someone's window, or he was thrown out of someone's window and also received another head injury. Now, if we remember all the way back to Phineas Gage, the man in America who got hit in the face with a railroad spike and the spike exited the back of his head, and we learned that some parts of the brain only do certain things, and part of it is personality, areas of the prefrontal cortex. And the biggest thing that came away from Gage was his mood changed, his temperament changed, his personality changed, and he became more obscene. So when people receive certain types of brain damage, it leads to obscenity, it leads to profanity, it leads to lack of impulse control. We've also talked about this with the case of Lawrence Kane on the Zodiac Killer. There might have been sort of there possibly is a connection between impulse control and a head injury with him. But the thing with somebody like West is everything. It's everything. You want to give, a sort of you want to give just like, a sort of typical thing that you would see growing up that would lead to this type of destructive behavior. It's there, no matter what it is. I mean, we're talking about abusing animals. We are talking about getting involved with petty crime at an early age, because he had a problem with stealing that I think went on to be like a lifelong issue. I'd have to say, though, that this case also horribly reminds me of the Boneyard Killers in America, who were Leonard Lake and Charles Ng. Charles Ng was an immigrant from Hong Kong who teamed up with a serial killer named Leonard Lake. And it's like, we have Fred and Rose West. It's like people can get involved in these sort of like team serial killers. But once again, there in that case, there is this, early form of stealing and shoplifting and robbery that never went away. And Leonard Lake actually committed suicide before he was ever able to, you know, be brought to justice, the same way that West committed suicide before he was ever able to be brought to justice. These things are not isolated. I mean, like, it depends on how you use the term isolated. I really mean to say these things are not just, horrible mysteries. There are things that people can understand about the psychological process. These happen all over the world, no matter what country you're talking about, no matter what continent you're talking about. With West, it just sort of seemed like all of these destructive elements came together in one person. There was even something about like he had possibly been raping his 13-year-old sister or something for repeatedly. He got her pregnant. I was just like, every single destructive thing you can imagine is going on in someone's life. And, he's bringing about a lot of it. But we got to remember, though, some of the biggest things that people look for when they're talking about this is that when they're talking about things that lead to serial killing, that lead to destructive elements, that lead to murders, that lead to this type of horrendous antisocial destructive behavior, what are they? Okay? What do we got? Abusing animals. We had that. What do we got? Starting fires. That's another one. Oh, what's the third? There's another third one. Is that just sort of like getting into physical violent acts? We just have like all sorts of things that lead people. Those are like the warning signs that lead people to serial killing and murder. And I mean, it's going to take a while to go through all of the things associated with the West murders because, once again, there are just countless documentaries on the subject. I saw that Rob Dyke had covered this, but when we were talking about the case of Henry McCabe, I was saying that I'm not really the biggest fan of Rob Dyke anymore. I liked him about 4 years ago, but it's like his presentation style is something that I've kind of, veered away from. But we could even go through that as well. So it's going to take a little bit more time to go through all of these kind of documentaries, and we can really get a larger feel. But what I can say is just that we have a very, very serious case of a mentally deranged individual, and one of the bodies that they found, was like his own daughter. That was Heather West, I believe, if I've remembered her name correctly. And it's just absolutely horrific. And not only do we do have all the things we talked about, abusing animals, head injuries, not only do we have violent acts, rape, but then you add in prostitution with this stuff. And that's like now correct me if I'm wrong, that was what Rosa West's previous partner was all about. He was the one running the brothel, the British Pakistani guy who was the father of Charmaine West. He was the one who kind of introduced Fred to the brothel business. So it's like you add in something like that, where it's just like another criminal element, or even if you just like don't even want to think that that's a bad thing, you're going to be dealing with people who are coming in from a variety of criminally associated backgrounds if you're going to be working in that industry, in a place where it's not very well regulated. But it's like every single possible thing went wrong with this. And when I was listening to one of the guys who was sort of a psychological profiler that they had feature in one of these documentaries, in the House of Horrors documentary that they did on this case, he was just like, after the first three bodies that they found, he was just like, there has to be more. There has to be more. It's like this is like a much bigger cycle of viciousness, a much bigger cycle of destruction. And yes. I'm sure even if you were just a true crime fan watching along and you say that they found three bodies from this guy and from the Wests, then you would be like, yes, of course there are going to be more because this is a vicious cycle that isn't going to end with just three people. I mean, like, this isn't what's it called? Crime of passion? Well, the passion is in the killing. And it's like, if anybody would be interested, perhaps in the future, we'll also do an upload on the Boneyard Killers, Leonard Lake and Charles Ng, and we can talk about some crossover, some commonalities. But one of the things that I think we really need to examine with this particular case is we need to look at just the how do these patterns evolve in a human being? And we talked about a lot of destructive elements, but we're going to get to more as we kind of go on and explore this case over a series of uploads. But one of the things that I'm even more fascinated with, that I've been fascinated ever since I had that conversation at that party 10 years ago, was how do people evade the system? How does this, mentally deranged individual just put on this kind of like false mask to the general public where people think, oh, he's so charming, and they want to be with him, and then it just turns out to be, like just a crazy, deranged, murderous individual. This has nothing to do with anything associated with race, culture. It crosses all those things. Charles Ng was from Hong Kong. Moses Sotole is a very good example of this in South Africa, where it's like, we see these things all over the world. There is something about, the human psychological makeup in our socializations. And yes, we got that comment in from Rick about nature versus nurture. Yes, we're going to be exploring that, and we're going to see what's going on with all of this. And I think that we could really kind of get into some deep questions here. Once again, this is going to be kind of like the intro to a larger series of uploads. I think, and to many of my regular listeners who kind of follow these things, they know that once I get on something, it kind of blows up. Like I did about 5 uploads on JonBenet after somebody suggested, which was another fan suggestion. If you want any cases discussed at all, please drop a comment below and we can learn more about them. I also mentioned I hope to cover Leonard Lake and Charles Ng, but I did Billy Joe Jenkins, and that was one where it's like, once again, just that turned into 5 uploads on the spot. The Solder Children. As soon as, I start getting into a case, I can't get away from it for weeks and stuff like that. And you're just always like, it's that moment where you're walking down the street and you're just thinking, well, what about this? What about that? Ugh. It can take you over for a little while, but that's why, we have these discussions here on the channel so we can kind of get some more answers. Well, thank you to everyone listening to my little intro on the West murders coming to us from the UK. And this is going to be one that's really going to be taking a little bit more time to go through all the films, and I hope we can have some more discussions about this, because this is one where it's not going to be like some of my other true crime uploads where we talk about the theories as what happened on this particular night and, what could have been the motivation for this and that. This is more about kind of like a discussion on psychology. What is society doing that is leading to these destructive events? Or what is, natural about a person that leads to these events? Because once again, we've already said these same events happen with people from all over the world. All right, well, this is our little introduction coming to an end. Thank you so much to everyone who's going to listen to this. I really appreciate all of the fans. And welcome to 2019. Happy New Year to everybody. And until next time.